Hi, this is Lindsay on behalf of Light Technology Publishing and the Sedona Journal of Emergence, and I am super grateful to be talking right now with Mary Ann Antenucci. And we have her here today to talk about what the essence of flowers are, flower essences, the intention of flowers, which is something that really intrigues me. She has a monthly column in the Sedona Journal. And hi, Mary Ann. It's good to see you.
Lindsay, I'm super excited about this, and I'm so grateful to the Sedona Journal of Emergence. I've been a regular columnist with them for, gosh, over 15 years, I believe. And I'm just super excited because what I love about working with the journal and also working out with flower essences is that it's my goal to make them accessible. I know early on when I first became introduced to flower essence, I was a skeptic. So my past background is I was in the medical profession. I was a anesthesia tech and a lab tech. So I was kind of like heavy science, but I grew up with tarot and Ouija boards and channeling. My mom was a super Catholic, but she was also like a super mystic as well. So all of these channels were familiar to me. And so, you know how we go through different, what would you call it? We go through these different versions of our life. So I was doing my medical stuff, and then I always had my intuitive stuff kind of on the side. I loved astrology. And my first introduction to flower essences was I was living in San Francisco. And there was a natural food store called it was called Real Foods, this was pre-Whole Foods. So it was one of those places like we have in all our urban areas and not so urban areas where you have books, you have crystals, you have, of course, organic produce, tinctures, the whole cornucopia of what you could possibly want. So I'm always into books. So I'm looking at the books and I see this, it was the Flower Essence Repertoire by the Kameninskis. And I was like, what is this? So I open it up and it's like, because I was like, flowers, what flowers for anger, flowers for self-esteem. So I was like, well, this is fascinating, but I kind of poo-pooed it at the time. But it called to me. And so I picked up one of the other books. It was like about Dr. Bach, who was in our times. He's sort of like the grandfather or father of flower essence therapy. So I'm reading through, and one of the things that really struck me, because I tend to be hyper anyway, but you know how we're all, overwhelmed and overcommitted and over managed for everything. So, I tend to be naturally irritable anyway. So I thought, so I saw this flower essence. It was for impatience. And I was like, what? Impatience. And thank God they had those remedies available. So my first two were impatience and holly, because holly's like for strong negative emotions. And I was having strong negative emotions at the time as well. So I paid attention to they want you to do with it. So they don't really want you to drink directly from the bottle. They usually want you to, because it works on a nanotechnology, so to speak. So less is more. So 1 drop in, or 1 to 4 drop. They usually want you to do odd numbers, 1 drop in, or a couple, let's just say 7 drops in a small 1 ounce bottle, and then top it off with, traditionally they used brandy, but because of our current circumstances, people need to have an alternative to alcohol, so that you could use apple cider vinegar. So I'm being the skeptic, like I'm like, how does this work, right? So I took I started off with the holly, and I thought I could feel all of a sudden, like my heart just start to open. You know how you get like these edgy irritations and like, so I felt like
Yes.
kind of melting effect, and I felt my heart open up. And because one of the signatures of holly is it's for strong emotions like hate and suspicion and just not living life. But the positive benefits is unconditional love and just feeling love. And I literally felt that opening. So then I would just like go, I would kind of week by week complete my set. And then at this point, I have thousands of them, right?
Wow.
So what I found, so backing up, flower essence are, we like to call them liquid lights, liquid, they're liquid essences. So there's an alchemy between the way that they're created is that you would take a flower at full bloom, let's say take a rose. Some companies, which I really have a deep appreciation for, sorry, I go back and forth. They do living flowers because they have constructed a way to make the essence out of a live flower. Because in general, they usually cut the flower and then have it float in a bottle, in a bowl of spring water or really clear, clean water in a crystal bowl or a really nice glass bowl, and then have it in full sunlight for at least 4 hours. So that's the key. It has to be sunlight. So that creates this alchemy, and the water becomes infused with the signature of that plant.
Oh, okay.
And then when they take that and then they'll preserve it by half water, half brandy, or half water, half apple cider vinegar, depending on what your particular needs are. And then from there, you make your stock formulas. So that sounds lofty and everything, and not everybody's going to do that. But what's really interesting, and I'm a little bit all over the place because I think it's important, is that one of the things with flower essences, because the flowers really do talk to you and they do have different signatures. So pay attention to what's around you. So for example, I grew up in San Francisco, urban area. So what do you have generally in urban areas, especially on the West Coast? You have dandelions that literally grow between the cracks of cement. You have nasturtiums, you have rosemary. So in San Francisco, in particular, if you're looking at it as a collective, what happens in San Francisco? Well, it's known to be a super creative, but also super cerebral and intellectual city. So what happens is, so the nasturtium is specifically for thinking too many thoughts and how do I organize and being so in my head all the time. So it helps to ground you from your head into your body. So it makes your thoughts a lot more organic rather than stuck in my head. So that is a perfect essence if you have to study too much and you just can't think outside the box anymore. And then by contrast, you have dandelion, little yellow blooms that grow, which are bees love, but also specifically grow in many urban environments. They just grow because they have to, is therefore pent up muscle tension, like dandelion specifically for when you're holding on too tight and you're having to hold it together and you're having to power through. So the dandelion dissolves that crystalline tension that your body gets stuck in.
Oh, wow.
And then rosemary more in flower essences, they work mentally as well, but they help cool your thoughts down. A lot of times they use them for women that are having hormonal issues because it'll help to cool emotion down, to cool your thoughts down. So that you, and all of these serve to ground you in your energy field. So primarily the way that flower essences work is they work on your etheric, emotional, and mental bodies. So we have this aura that extends out, right? So say if we're getting irritated by something, it's going to show up here as like, oh, that neighbor with the dog, right? So
Yeah.
it's beep, 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 beep. But then it starts to drift down. Like if nothing gets done about it, either you have an attitude adjustment or you become more and more annoyed by it. Then it starts getting into your mental field where you're kind of obsessed about it. And it starts getting your physical field where your body's physically reacting to the anger of it or
Oh,
the irritation of it.
oh,
And
wow.
so what flower essences do, it's kind of like you're younger, but more old school, we had vinyl. So a lot of times the needle, if the album or record had a scratch, the needle would get stuck in the groove and it couldn't get out. So
Yes.
it's kind of similar to your energy field. It's like you get stuck in this groove and can't get out. So flower essences start to smooth that over by antidoting it. So it's like, oh, you're irritated, but let's take a look at the bigger picture, right? So it kind of lifts the ceiling up, like, oh, okay. So it basically changes that gut reaction that doesn't serve you.
Mm.
So a lot of the work that I do, primarily I would call myself, well, I'm a certified spiritual counselor. I've worked with different energy systems over the years. So I studied acupuncture in Singapore. I am a third degree black belt in Kempo karate. And I'm a certified spiritual counselor through the American Board of Hypnotherapy in Anaheim. So with that said, and then I've been a reader, so I do read tarot and I've worked with crystals. I've the whole gamut, right? Whole gamut. So I make gem and flower essences. What I like to do too is with some of the astrological events is say, for example, we had the Lionsgate the other day. So I'll put together a grid and then make an essence out of that um, to promote the changes or to lock in the changes. I worked at several metaphysical stores down in Southern California for some of my career. And we would do psychic fairs. You have a lot of people, you're doing 15-minute readings or 20-minute readings. And what I noticed just doing that type of work, I developed the flower essences as opposed to sage, to kind of clear the energy and purify, like start fresh. So I made a formulation that would help you start fresh with each client.
Oh, wow.
So it's like, okay, we're good again. We're fresh. We can all do meditations and stuff, but we're all interconnected. And it's kind of like, you get magnetized by different things. So it basically it sort of just clears the field. So anytime you're doing your work, you're starting fresh. So circling back to what I do with my clients is I work with a lot of creative people that are, writing or doing art projects or big problem solvers, a lot of business type of people. So the big issue that I see today, and I write about it a lot in the columns that I write about, is what are you doing with what you have? Because so many people, especially in the advent of social media and all of this exposure that's not good and is good. I mean, there's the good news and the bad news. But what's happened is that we've gotten in this position of always comparing, always comparing, always comparing. So we think we have to be more of that in order to be successful, when maybe if we just focused here and cultivated our gifts, and that's what I love to do. Let's cultivate your gifts, because that's how you're going to truly shine, right? And
Yes.
so what gets in the way? Doubt is a big one, especially for women. Denial, like, oh, like you could be the most amazing, like the most amazing painter in the world, but you're like, oh, no,
Yeah.
that green's not right. And then you want to throw everything away. And it's like, no, I want people to get out of their own way. And what I love about the flower essences, so for example, say if I do a tarot reading with you or an energy session, we identified some really deep and profound issues that we'll call them ahas, like, oh my God, we can do that. That's great. It's like, I can see it now. However, what ends up happening, and this is why I love working with flower essences, is that we can have these ahas, right? And then 3 weeks later, it's sort of like we ran out of battery, right?
Yeah.
Then we're kind of back in the same boat. So what flower essences do is they create a bridge out of that stuckness, or out of that, let's just call it, for lack of a better description, that mental energy that just, we're always like, in the cartoons, like Pigpen.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Creating the same. So flower essences on an individual basis break that up. So you're not going to default into that same place anymore.
I love that.
That you may default in another place, but we can work with that. So but the point of it is, it's like it allows you to become unstuck because it changes your set point or your default point. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. You're giving us good visuals here. Yeah, great examples.
So where do we go here?
Oh, this is great. So how can we use what you've said, in terms of working with the essences for our intuition and also for connecting to Earth?
That's a great question. So for our intuition, a lot about intuition primarily is about trust.
Right.
And it's about trusting what you see. So flower essences can get you back into that place of my version of reality. That we're not talking about, some crazy version of reality.
Right.
We're not talking about, unreliable version of, we're talking about, what do I have? What am I doing with what I have? Because it boils down to, what am I paying attention to, and how real is that to me?
Right. Right.
So one of the therapists I've worked with in the past, she'll send people to me, and she said, I send people to you because so we can determine if what they're seeing and feeling is real, or if it's just some weird construct.
Interesting.
So we basically help to dissolve these constructs, because everybody gets stuck on something, right?
Yeah, that's very relatable.
So we basically focus on trust of self. And one of the best, this is one of my absolute favorite essences out of the many. There's this gal in Michigan. I think she's written for you guys before. She has this company, La Vie de la Rose.
Okay.
So she has this amazing essence. It's called Gift of God.
Oh.
So when you tap into that, and this is applicable across the board. So if you tap into that, the energy of that, the signature of that flower, right, is that what it's really about is that, I'm going to use the God word. I like to use the God word because can be somewhat lazy, so I don't want to say God, goddess.
Yeah.
Right? So I use the God word just for simplicity's sake, because we all have
Yeah,
the
our
divine.
own word.
We'll call it the divine. So
Yeah.
the divine wants you to be happy, healthy, fully expressed. So if you look at a flower is the highest vibration of the plant. So the flower
Yep.
has to plant a seed, grow, has to ground, has to germinate, and then it has to bloom and blossom, and then provide the fruits of that energy, right? So there's this essence called Gift of God. And what Gift of God is about is that God wants you to thrive. God wants you to be happy. God wants you to be fully self-expressed. That's another thing that I try to get people to do. I want you to be fully self-expressed.
Yeah.
So the Gift of God says, you need to have enough self-esteem in order to actualize what you're meant to be.
Right.
And so the work itself more has to do with us, like how to promote self-esteem, how to get out of your own way, how to be fully self-expressed. What are those mechanisms that have been made you stumble, and what can help grow you?
Well, yeah.
So when you work with Gift of God, it's like, boop, 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 raise my esteem. Oh, if I raise my esteem, it's like, we all have smartphones now. you have to have enough charge on the battery in order for you to actualize the things that you want to do.
That's a good example. Yeah. No, so we're working with flowers and flower essences. Is that in itself the connection to Mother Earth, or is there a more of another formula that we could use to get more grounded? That's what I mean by connection to Mother Earth, is like a lot of us are disconnected from the root chakra.
Oh, okay.
We're
Yeah,
kind of grounded, like you said, kind of maybe up in our heads a little bit more.
well, there's many, but one in
Right.
particular is corn.
Oh,
So
interesting. Corn. Never would have
corn.
thought. Mhm.
So the corn essence is great if you live in a city or if you just need to ground.
Wow.
Okay, because it helps you not to be as distracted and helps to root you right where you are.
Interesting.
And let's see what else. Well, another thing, like this is a little bit of what else can, another thing that can ground you to Mother Earth is you can make your own essence. I mean, obviously,
Right.
you got to not, if you have oleander in the garden or some poisonous flowers, you don't want to use those,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
So, but if you look, this is what I like to do, and I invite people to do, is look around what grows around you. Okay,
Mm.
so for example, if you move to a new area and you're having, there's a flower essence called sweet pea, and it has to do with how do I ground myself into my new current reality,
Okay.
into my new current environment. But another aspect of it is that say you move from, well, I'm living in rural Oregon now. So I moved from San Francisco, so now I'm in Oregon. So what's around me? There's a lot of pine. There's what flowers are around me? There's like a lot of irises. There's some wild orchids. So what people can do is they could take those flowers and then, make them, put them in a bowl, that kind of, and solarize them with the sun. But that formula will help you, some of them called the overlords of the local energies, that will help ground you into your current geography.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So it's like, oh,
Love that.
there's a dandelion. I have my nasturtiums. I
Yeah.
have my gardenia. So all of those are serving to create this matrix.
Yeah.
That's where you're part of nature. And I think that's what get lost with us. It's like we think we're above nature or we
Yeah.
think we're outside of nature,
Right.
but we're really part of nature.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And the flower essences help you to realize, oh, I'm really part of nature. So for example,
Yes.
uh,
I love this.
so for example, sunflower, which is
Oh, yeah.
it's one of my favorites. So what does sunflower do? It grows on a vertical axis,
We
right?
have some just out
Boom.
in the front yard. Yeah.
So sunflower is great for promoting self-esteem,
Okay.
and it helps you to radiate as you. You know how it's just like, hi, I
Yes.
I love you.
Uh-huh.
It basically opens that part up in you. It's like where you're taking real ownership. And then the cool thing is like you have this thick stalk. So
Yeah.
that thick stalk fortifies your energetic constitution.
Mm.
So it's going to help you, it's going to help safeguard your esteem. It's going to help it's going to make it kind of rock solid.
Yeah. Wow.
And then you're like, oh, I'm a beautiful flower.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm thinking right now, I'm being reminded of the beautiful prickly pear cactus that we have around because we're in Sedona, Arizona. And I don't know, I think they do grow the flowers before the fruit comes, right? And
Yeah,
so
I'm
that,
not familiar with them, but likely they would, right? So
right.
what colors are they?
They're often peach colored and they're very gorgeous. Yeah. So
So think about that prickly pear right now,
yeah,
right?
yeah, I'm
Flower.
thinking about
And see, and you know how like it just kind of makes you smile?
it. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So that part of the signature
Cool.
of that plant is like, so does it have spikes on it?
Some do and some don't. Most of them do. Yeah. Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a way of protecting the sanctity of self.
That's so interesting and beautiful.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it does. Yeah.
So so play, look at the flowers. So, the flower essence manufacturers are people that do it. They're basically doing a meditation.
Right.
the, they're studying the actual, say, anatomy of the plant and the physiology of plant and where it grows, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
There's still this alchemical conversation that occurs. So
Mm.
in different makers will have different definitions for the same flower or the different experiences. So
Mm.
that's why, like, if you have a prickly pear in your yard, like you could do, I have my sunflower, I got my prickly pear, I
Yep.
got my gardenia. I mean, that's like very specific to what the needs are for your home and family.
Wow. Yeah, wow, I never thought of that. Well, it's really amazing to learn in your monthly articles as well how the different essences work. And do you want to walk us through a little bit of, when a client comes to you, um, maybe they have something that they're dealing with, maybe in the examples that you've already given, and do you work with them with their aura, kind of do some sort of therapeutic touch or Reiki with them and then connect with the flower essences, or do you just go to flower essences right away, or how does that work for you?
For my practice now, my flower essences are more of an adjunct.
Right.
So so for example, you could come to me and I would take, the way that I do my readings is um, I hold the tips of your fingers and I have you say your name 3 times. And then I do like an energetic scan.
Mhm.
So I'm looking for where you're in balance, where the stumbling blocks or the potholes are, and where you're out of balance. And so I'll tune into what's going on, where you're kind of getting stuck emotionally or
Okay.
maybe on a story. And then we go from there to help identify, more of the specifics of what's going on. And then I will, I'll take a look as to how we spoke about earlier about what is going to create a bridge out of that sense of stuckness or
Yeah.
that issue. What's going to help ungroove that issue so that you can become more you and go on to what you're meant to do.
Oh, that's amazing.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, if it makes perfect sense. Now I'm going to take a little bit of an offshoot here, but it is something that I think a lot of the listeners want to know. Um, in terms of mass consciousness on planet Earth right now, do you feel that many of us humans are disconnected from our intuition?
Um, I would say yes and no. I feel that we're all still getting our messages and messaging, but we're not paying attention to it. It's almost like we have to have it confirmed.
Mm,
But then the issue is then we're having it confirmed by some like an unreliable source.
right. That's,
And so
yeah.
does that make sense?
I was
So
gonna say, what kind of, you're onto an example here, maybe you could shed light on.
yeah, no, I'm talking like in terms of social media. So for
Oh,
example,
yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
because that would become more an unreliable source. So the mass consciousness. So if people just looked in the mirror, for example, and said, "I love you, I love you today. I am enough. I love you," that would fortify a lot of trust, and that would help us to ground in more as the power of our individuality, which would in turn help us connect better rather than how do I connect by comparison.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Well, the flower essences, you talked about intuition and how that's related to trust and how we could use that to increase kind of our intuition. Is there anything else that comes to you when someone feels very disconnected from their intuition? Because intuition, I think, is really important because it is the connection with the divine, within, I think. Any comments on that?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
No, I was just thinking about your intuition is kind of the connection with your
Oh,
divine
okay. The
divine
connection.
you gave some examples before about how intuition can be strengthened by trust, trust of self. Is there anything else that comes to you about the state of humanity, and needing to trust more, needing to listen to
Needing
themselves
to
more?
trust more, actually also needing to have more sacred time.
Oh, that's
It
important.
it doesn't mean that you have to create a ritual or like a meditation out of everything, but what it
Right.
does mean is, say, for example, if you have animals, you know how animals kind of go off by themselves?
Yeah.
And how, they hang out with you, but at certain points they'll just go off. And like my dog likes to go sit out on the deck. He sits in the chair, she sits in the chair, and she's just is. So
Right.
so a lot of times what's going to connect us is just to be present and forget about, because this is where I think we get disconnected about how we should think, how things should be, what we need to do in order to get to those higher places, when actually it might just be as simple as, let me walk around the block and pay attention and see what's out there, just as a being walking around the block.
I love that.
And
And
so
not like,
that's gonna fortify who we are in our collective. It's like just by being who you are in your environment without, okay, now I gotta burn a candle, I gotta bring out my black tourmaline, I gotta bring out my citrine, I gotta have to have my Herkimer diamond to connect
yeah.
to God. That's all good and great, but the real juice is going to come from just being of awe.
Yeah. No, I love that. I don't think we generally have enough time, or we don't create rather enough time for that usually during the day, especially if we have a lot of things that we need to do in Western culture for sure.
Oh, definitely. And many cultures now, because the world is getting westernized.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so speaking of which, I have to ask, how do you believe humanity is changing, or what do you think the collective is going through right now?
The collective is basically going through a reset.
Interesting.
And it is because on one level, we know the way that we're operating isn't nourishing. And on
Right.
the other level, we're all seeking to have that spiritual and soul and creative nourishment. So the collective is basically, kind of like it's trying to grab onto something that makes sense, because right now, a lot of things don't make a lot of sense, though, in the traditional way. So each of us as a collective are trying to find our way so that we can connect on a much deeper level. So if you think about it, the more fortified we are spiritually, or the more we're just taking ownership and being present with who we are, that's going to strengthen the collective to create, a more refined experience globe of connection and spirituality. I'm
Yeah.
gonna cough. Excuse me.
Yeah. Um, I see the world as everything is spirit, everything is connected, spirit, God, however you want to say it. Do you think that we're having a spiritual crisis collectively?
I do. I do, but I also feel it's fixable too.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I don't feel we're, heading off the cliff. It all boils down to, what are you paying attention to?
Yeah,
So the more that, and this isn't just about, oh, I'm going to be unconditional love for everything.
that's
That's
right.
that's not the solution. The solution is, what am I doing now?
Mm,
What vibration am I creating that's creating the ripple effect? Because it's really that simple. I say, hey, Lindsay, you're awesome. I love what you're doing. so we have this exchange, right?
Yeah.
So the more that we have that, like, I'm here with you, you're here with me, that presence, the more that's going to enhance the experience of the collective, because it's that drop of water. So we're all the drop of water.
Yes.
Starts right now. But what happens is, like, we have all of this dissonance. So it's that's part of what's happening right now is we have these what's the word for it? You would say dissonant sound, how like sound waves cancel each other out. We're
Right.
kind of going through that process. So
Mm.
so as we become stronger, our ripples will create more effect rather than canceled out. Because I suspect what's going on right now, there's so much disruption and dissonance, it cancels out a lot of the better things that could be happening. So that's why we have to be better about creating the better things.
I love this, and I love how flower essences can help us break through some of these issues that we're struggling with to become better connected. So,
Yay.
uh,
And then when I write, well, go ahead, ask your question. I was going
no,
to say.
go ahead, go ahead.
Okay, so when I write, like a lot of times when people write about flower essence, they'll say, oh, okay, flower essence for anger, like, in the flower essence repertoire and other collections that you'll have many. What I love about flower essences, they're similar to homeopathy in that way, is that you can get really specific. So the more specific are, the more specific results you can get. So
Okay.
that's kind of like the sweet spot. Is like if I get to the core of that thing very specifically, boop, 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 goes back to creating this amazing ripple effect, right? So when I write, I like to kind of pay attention. I watch news, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So I pay attention to what's going on, and then I start coming up with a theme. So I take my theme and then I build the flower essences around them.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah. Aside from flower essences, because that is your specialty, uh, what other practice can we bring into our practical lives to help us elevate our frequency?
Just walking.
Oh, I love it. I
Just
love it.
just walking.
Yeah,
Anybody can do it. Just
I
walking.
love it.
Just walking. Just like that's why, like, my whole goal is make it workable, make it simple.
Yeah,
Because I'm a firm believer in movement begets movement. So if you're stuck, go walk around the block.
that's so important. I love it.
And being outside, that's also important. And it doesn't matter if you're in a city or a cave or a park or swimming pool, just get outside, because we are beings of light, and
Yes.
we need to have that infusion of light, even if it's foggy. We need to have, that's where we're connected as star beings.
Yes.
We're not meant to be enclosed. We're meant to be part of our environment, and that's how you become part of your environment.
Yeah, and we are biology, we are Mother Earth, our bodies are made of her essence as well. And the more time we can spend outside, I think the more connected we can be. So I like that simplicity for that.
So simple, yeah. And what I do when I go to a new place, I walk, weather permitting, but even weather not permitting, I make a point of going outside every day.
So
Okay, because I feel like it enhances your immune system, but it also helps you to create alchemy with all the fauna and flora in the environment, your current environment. So for example, like in my area, I'm more in rural Oregon right now. So we have deer, we have cats, we have crows, we have raccoons, but it's weird because we're all kind of neighbors.
right.
So I see the deer sees me, the babies are out there, walk around the corner, almost got, face to face with one of the bucks. And I'm like, I'm a city girl. So I'm like, oh,
That's awesome.
I'm like, oh, good. Okay. I try not to be scared, but it's kind of funny because I was thinking, they must think I'm their neighbor too. You know what I mean?
Right. I love that. Yeah. And you have a book as well, right?
Oh, I
Essence.
have my book.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Essences of
Essences
Nature.
of Nature.
There you go.
And one of the ways that you can utilize this book is that you can use it as an oracle. So you get up in the morning and you go, okay, what do I need to focus on today? So what do I need to focus on today? Arnica. So
Okay.
what does Arnica say? Okay.
This is great.
Arnica says, unlocks recurrent trauma, reduces block patterns, frees energy, aids emotional recovery, and restores vitality. The action of the arnica is similar to pulling out a long, painful splinter that has been deeply embedded and covered with old scar tissue, creates a new pathway to healing. Breaking through limitations, unconscious patterns while healing the reverberations of old trauma.
Now
So
these are all your downloads when you wrote
these
this.
are, yeah, these are my downloads. So
Yeah.
these are all my, so I have, as I said, I have hundreds of them. And so when I write about them, it's like, okay, blah, blah, blah. Okay, arnica. And it was funny because, you know, you get these downloads like what the plant wants to tell you. So this
Yeah.
is what the plant wants to tell you.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering about when you write about or when you tune in or you channel that flower essence, that's what they're gonna wanting to speak to people, you know, when you use them. So you're kind of like channeling their voice.
I'm channeling their voice in a particular, I'm channeling their voice in a particular way.
That's amazing. Well, is there any other message that you have for the viewers today or anything else that you would want to share?
Sure. It's kind of sort of repeating myself. However, what I'd like to share is pay attention. Pay attention. That's the best thing you can do. I believe if we paid more attention, we would have more access to all of our gifts and talents and all of our happiness. And by changing and honoring your individual as an individual amidst the group, think about, we are unique petals connected, but we have our own integrity.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's beautiful.
So focus on like, you know, integrity. People think of integrity as like this moral compass, but it's also about how you're constructed.
Can you say more
So,
about that?
well, because if we, you know, like for example, if you have integrity, that means like all your parts are working because we all have personal integrity. So it's basically how do we construct ourselves? What makes us strong? What is our personal framework? And how do we go from there? What makes us non-negotiable?
Oh, that's a good way to put it. Well, thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure. So
Oh, it's been wonderful.
it's
So
been wonderful. Thank you.
yeah, so everybody, we're here with Mary Ann Antenucci, and she's a channel for what she calls the essences of flowers or flower essences. And I've learned a lot today from you, and it's been very insightful, especially with using what we have in our current environment when it comes to flowers, right? So you could find her at some of the links below. We're going to post her website, and she has her book too. Yeah, perfect. Did you want to mention where else they can find you on websites or how to get in touch with you?
They can get in touch with me at my website, maryannantenucci.com or maryannantenucci@gmail.com.
Perfect. So we're going to post that in this post here so that you guys have the link. And you can also see her monthly columns as she brings forth flower essences every month in the Sedona Journal if you go to sedonajournal.com. All right. So thanks again. And we should have you on for another interview very soon.
Oh, thanks, Lindsay.